Today, we are going to analyze a very beautiful, very interesting, and very different episode of Adventure Time. It is episode 17 of season 3, titled Thank You. The episode starts by showing the morning routine of a snow golem, waking up, having breakfast, and realizing that he needs to get more food. He then prepares himself and goes out in search of what he needs when suddenly he passes by Finn and Jake, who seem extremely pissed off with the Ice King. It seems the Ice King stole their sandwiches and locked himself in an invincible armor where they can't beat him up. At this moment, Finn threatens the Ice King, and he responds that if they were him, they would do what he does. This gives us a great hint about one of the issues this episode will address, simply putting yourself in someone else's shoes. But it's a bit more complicated than that. We're talking about putting yourself in someone else's shoes when that person is your enemy, when that person has somehow wronged you and made you experience things like hatred, injustice, or sadness, for example. That's when it becomes much harder to be understanding and try to see things through the other person's eyes. After all, you want that person to go to hell, right? By showing the situation with Finn and Jake so quickly, the episode kind of warns us that the universe of the show doesn't revolve solely around the protagonists, as at that moment they were already living their adventure for a while. At that moment, the episode had just begun, and we were watching someone else's adventure. We would see things from the other's perspective and put ourselves in their shoes. I find it very interesting when series or games implement this concept that the world happens even without you. A good way to do this is by telling alternative stories of other characters, like this wonderful episode that gives attention to the golem, because the two main characters are busy and go unnoticed. When he arrives at the tree where he wants to pick some pears, he notices that he is surrounded by enemies, the firewolves, who seem ready to attack at any moment. And of course, a fight breaks out. During the chaos, he finds a wolf pup that was left behind. However, the golem just wants to go home. He ignores and tries to avoid the wolf pup at all costs. After all, they were enemies, and he didn't care about the wolf at all. The golem then passes by Finn and Jake again, who are still trying to destroy the Ice King's armor. The Ice King then says the phrase, "You are all wasting your time." And I started to wonder if this phrase might be an allusion to the golem's situation, denying help the wolf just because they were supposed to be enemies, even though that specific wolf had never actually harmed him. But I think I might have overthought it, and it probably has nothing to do with it. When the golem arrives at his home, he realizes that the wolf followed him there. However, he still puts the wolf outside. It doesn't take long for his compassion to take over, and he realizes that the wolf was far from home and it was getting dark. So he ends up letting his enemy into his home. It's at this moment that they form a bond because the golem allows himself to try to understand the wolf. He feeds him, plays with him, and makes him sleep. However, he realizes that the wolf misses the other wolves, and the next day he sets out to return the wolf pup to his home. When he passes by Finn and Jake again, this time the Ice King's armor is slowly being broken by the two with the use of axes. The golem then begins to climb the fire mountain just to return the wolf pup, which is obviously very dangerous and could even kill him. At a certain point, he notices that the wolf pup has strayed away from him and is now very close to the flames, which are very high. Trying to rescue him could be the end for the golem. At this moment, he has to make the decision to risk his own life to return the wolf pup to his home. He ends up choosing to go after the pup, proving that the situation of the other was more important to him than his own pains. The craziest part is that he does all this for someone who, until recently, was considered they stopped being enemies at that moment. He then manages to reach the top of the mountain, but as a consequence, ends up losing a good part of his body, which, in a way, we might understand as when we sacrifice a significant part of ourselves for someone we care deeply about. And even though it hurts, our pain isn't enough to stop us from acting for those we truly love. He manages to deliver the wolf pup, but the parents threaten to attack, so he leaves and he passes by Finn and Jake once again. This time, the armor around the Ice King has finally been broken. I like to think that perhaps the indestructible armor of the Ice King, which gets broken throughout the episode, might symbolize the barrier that prevents someone from putting themselves in another's shoes. This barrier is extremely difficult to break, but not impossible. It starts intact when the golem doesn't want to put himself in the wolf's place, then begins to slowly crack when the golem decides to try doing so, and finally breaks when the golem manages to truly see things from his enemy's perspective. And again, maybe I'm just overthinking it, but it's nice to think of it this way. The wolves then appear again, and the pup and the golem start to play. The golem then says that They have a beautiful and very nice home, showing that he indeed managed to set aside their differences and stopped seeing them as enemies at that moment. Finn then sees the scene and asks Jake if the creature needs help. Jake says it's a snow creature and that it looked like it was smiling. The two comment on how snow creatures and firewolves usually hate each other, but had actually learned to tolerate each other. They had indeed learned that it is possible to understand even your enemy if you really try. The Ice King then says that they could learn something from this, and Finn gives the Ice King a kiss on the cheek, as if to say that even though they are enemies, they can still at least try to understand each other in the end. At least that's what I understood, right? And this is definitely one of the most beautiful episodes of Adventure Time, teaching us that even the most different people, even enemies, can understand each other if they're willing to try. Sometimes we need to sacrifice a little bit of ourselves because we care, and we must always strive to break the armor that prevents us from seeing things from another's perspective. Enemies might hate each other, but they can still learn to tolerate one another. I think it's really cool how all this was conveyed in an 11-minute episode. Adventure Time is surreal. Thank you very much for accompanying me until now. I invite you to subscribe to the channel, and I really hope we can see each other again soon. See you in the next video. Bye.